Al compañero Savas Matsas tuvimos la suerte, el gusto de escucharlo en varias oportunidades en la Argentina, en congresos del Partido Obrero, en conferencias internacionales políticamente muy ricas para nosotros. Hoy vamos a escucharlo a Savas en condiciones particulares, no solamente porque lo vamos a oír a la distancia, sino que, bueno, se ha tomado el trabajo y la responsabilidad de asegurar, ¿no es cierto?, que este mensaje hoy nos llegue a todos nosotros. Cuando le propusimos a Savas formar parte de este encuentro de hoy, no solo aceptó, sino que enseguida nos advirtió de los problemas que implicaba encontrarse incluso lejos de la capital de Grecia, lejos de Atenas, con graves dificultades de conexión. Pero venciendo esas dificultades, Savas grabó ayer su discurso para esta jornada, advirtiendo que podríamos tener problemas de conexión que en parte estamos teniendo. Pero de todas maneras tengo entendido que él está siguiendo el desarrollo de este diálogo, de esta reunión, así que le mandamos un gran abrazo desde acá y ahora ya mismo vamos a escuchar la intervención que él preparó para este encuentro.
Saludos, cuarta internacionalistas desde Grecia. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. In these dialogues on Trotsky, which are very important today. Although I speak you from Greece, I feel very close to you because we are very close with Argentina Revolucionaria in America Latina. So I speak from a small island named Kalinos, near the southeastern border between Greece and Turkey, in two countries which today are the brink of a war which is reactionary from both sides, and this is manipulated by imperialism, by all kinds of imperialists, the Yankees, the French imperialists, Italian imperialists, German imperialists, Israel, and some other Arab reactionary regimes like the United Arab Emirates and the dictatorship of Al-Sisi in Egypt. We live very dangerous moments, and for this reason we are very sensible for such anniversaries, such as the 18th anniversary of the murder of the greatest revolutionary, Leon Trotsky, the founder of the Red Army and of the Fourth International. The conditions in which we are fighting, from the beginning you understand, are conditions not just of a national crisis, of a capitalist country like all the others, but a crisis, but in a crisis which immediately has an international character. All kinds of different forces are involved in this situation in which we are now. And Greece, in this sense, and our region, is a microcosm scene showing all the situation in one sense. You have the combination of a capitalist bankruptcy, you have a pandemic outside any control, the coronavirus pandemic, and you have the imperialist drive to war. But not only that, in this very dark picture of the situation, there is also its opposite. Because we see all around us, including Greece, mobilizations of the oppressed, rebellions, even revolutions something that a word and a process that nobody, very few wanted to accept that is on the way in our days. Look at Lebanon, for example. Lebanon in ruins. Lebanon, which started a revolution in October last year, has paused for a period because of the pandemic, and now again is going on. And it is not an exception. We have a revolutionary process in Sudan, in Iraq, in Algeria, in all the Northern Africa, but also there is a lot of social anger, of popular anger, working class anger in Europe itself, including Greece. Greece, which is under a very right-wing government now, a government which introduced laws that the last military dictatorship had introduced, like banning the demonstrations, and you resist all these attacks. Not only that, we fight to counterattack. We are, first of all, one of the few forces in the region who fight for internationalism against this nationalist frenzy all over us as the war tensions are rising. We, the EEK, our party, as well as the Rakowski Center that we founded during the former Yugoslav war in the 90s, we fight on Lenin's line, Trotsky's line, to transform this imperialist war drive to conditions for a revolution. Claiming together with Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht that our main enemy is within our country. It is the capitalist class. It is the imperialist patrons of this class. It is in this background, it is that I said that Greece is a microcosm, it's not just a national exception. You had this in different ways, similar phenomena in Trotsky himself said once that we have to look to specificities and to understand that we have in each occasion, like now, that they describe very summarizing the problem, an original, of the basic features of the basic phase of the world historical process. So we see always our struggle, our fight, in the global fight for the world revolution, and in this sense, for the international. The question of internationalism is for us something, a life and death question, and not just a question of propaganda, abstract propaganda, that's the good of internationals. No, we know we will not survive, and we cannot go to victory for our historical goals without what Trotsky had called internationalism in action. If we lose a little our internationalism, if we restrict internationalism only to propaganda, abstract propaganda, then we will be victims of the pressures of our national milieu. And we live in a period where all kinds of nationalist pressures are building up all over, in every country all over the world. So in one sense, there is an urgency and an actuality to discuss on Trotsky and on Trotskyism and on the international today. It is not something which belongs to the past. We don't make a commemoration like a ritual. For us, to use an expression that we put in an article of us, memory is not just a collection of historical traces. Memory is a memory of the future. Trotsky does not belong to the past century. He did not, his actuality did not finish the day that Ramón Mercader del Río, the the agent sent by Stalin and the GPU killed him in Coyoacan, Mexico City. He's alive, and I will try to explain why. As I said before, we live worldwide in what is called the perfect storm. You have this unique combination of an unsolvable global capitalist crisis, which at least the last 12 years we see it developing all over the world without any solution, from 2007, 2008 onwards until now. And all the measures that try to stop this process, the big banks, the central banks, the central capitalist governments, all they fail. On the contrary, they created worse conditions. Already the world crisis was out of control last year before the pandemic, and then pandemic create the total impasse in every sense. Of course, against all those who see the pandemic only as a, say, as a problem of epidemiology, or others who try to approach the pandemic only with all kind of reactionary conspiracy theories, a la Bolsonaro, you name it, or Trump, we have to see the connection between the pandemic and this capitalism crisis. The pandemic proved the incompatibility of this global capitalist system with the life process itself. It is the whole, what Marx had called the social metabolism between the human society and the nature. This social metabolism has every time a specific historically determined form. Now this form is capitalism. But capitalism in decline, capitalism in crisis, as we experience now, is really makes the contradiction between the capitalist form of the social metabolism and the content of the social metabolism, which is all the needs of the life process, the urgent needs, the immediate needs now, are incompatible. And that's opened the road either to the collapse of human society and probably also life in this planet, or the opposite is the only way out is a world revolution. In global problems, you can have only global solutions, no national solutions. Nationalism is not only blindness, it is a recipe for disaster. Many people, they say now, during and after the lockdowns, during the pandemic, that we live the end of the so-called globalization, that there will be with a return to the national state everywhere. Look, it is the opposite of what happens. Of course, you have all the nationalist reactions building up. You have everywhere slogans like America first, like Trump, or Germany first, or in Europe, or France first, or Greece first, all stupidities like that. And the policies, save yourself and bigger your neighbor or kill your neighbor, slogans that humanity knew it in the last century, in the 30s, and we know the tragic result of that. Nationalism poisoned the blood of the economic life, as Trotsky had said, but at the same time, it's not a solution. On the contrary, in the 30s, last century, you had a return in the most vicious forms of nationalism, including fascism, but it did not solve no problem to capitalism, and we had the Second World War. So we are in a such crucial moment of history. During the pandemic, the disruption of the global supply chains, as they call it, the global value chains or supply chains, because of the lockdowns and other things, the protectionism, created havoc, because the interconnection of the world economy, the interconnection of all of the social processes, despite all the differences, of course, The combined character of all this uneven development of the history is much more advanced today in the 21st century than in the 20th century. We are in the advanced point of what Lenin and Trotsky had called the imperialist epoch, the epoch of capitalist decline. Everything is much more even connected than even the time of Lenin or Trotsky. So the attempt today to return back to national solutions, to national measures, national antagonism, to look as they prevent, it is a dead end. They accelerate the slide of humanity to a catastrophe. The only solution is internationalism, but not internationalism in words, but internationalism in deeds, in practice. So the question of the international today is more urgent than ever before. So it is linked with the nature of our epoch, with the historical epoch, not just the conjunction, the epoch itself. Trotsky, in his book, The Third International After Lenin, he explained the development and the differences between the first, the second, and the third international as differences in the historical development of capitalist society and of the working class itself. So we have historically also to see today the situation and this need. Everybody, many people speak about this need of an international, but they cannot always, they cannot understand what kind of international we need today. Many people say, okay, you speak about the fourth international. But the fourth international, it's something to in the past. The fourth international, fragmented after the assassination of Trotsky to different groupings calling themselves the fourth international. That the fourth international, it was a shipwreck. It was a failure. I will try in the few time we have to oppose this totally false idea. We have to look again what it was the fourth international. It was not just a gathering of left people or left organizations or radical left or revolutionary left organizations all over the world on the basis of anti-Stalinism. There are some self-proclaimed Trotskyists who said that after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 and the collapse of all the Stalinist regimes, Trotsky has no raison d'etre. There's no, it's finished together with its historical opponent, Stalin. But no, Trotsky and Trotskyism and the Fourth International that was founded in 1938, it was never just anti-Stalinism. It was the consistent fight against the worst obstacles that the revolutionary movement faced in history, the struggle to complete what had started in October 1917 in Russia, which means the World Socialist Revolution. The process of revolutionary transition from the last antagonistic class society to a world classless society, communism. And this is what we said many times, that the historical cycle, or rather the historical spiral opened by the October Socialist Revolution 1917 has not been closed in 1989, 1991 with the demise of the Soviet Union, when the inglorious collapse of the bureaucratic regimes and the turning of the bureaucracies to restorationary forces to go back to capitalism. No, the International was founded by Trotsky and his comrades on the basis to complete the world revolution and taking in every time analyzing what is the situation, the concrete strategical tasks for the world working class and the vanguard of the working class, organized in revolutionary parties, sections of an international. Against any nationalist conception of the building of a party, Trotsky taught us that you have the task to build the revolutionary international, and only on this basis you can build a revolutionary party in a country. As you cannot have socialism in a single country, you cannot have revolutionary politics in a single country, or a revolutionary party in a single country, separated from the fight to, to build a revolutionary international expressing the deepest needs of the epoch of transition toward communism. This is the Fourth International. For this reason, we fight. And for this reason also, the last years of the struggle of Leon Trotsky, just before his assassination, are very important to study again. In his diary of exile in 1935, he said, Trotsky himself, that his work to found the International, the Fourth International, he considered himself as much more important than his role in the October Revolution or in the founding of the Red Army, which won the imperialist armies, defending the revolution. And this was not just because no other revolutionary leader was around to do the job. Of course, he was unique in many aspects, but he expressed a historical necessity, not just his heroism, the heroism of an indispensable personality. Himself, he said, I have 5 years in front of me for this preparation. And even he predicted his own assassination. He said that if Stalin finds himself in conditions of destabilization or of the beginning of a second world war, he will try an assassination attempt against my life. He said, I don't know how big it will be, this blow against the Fourth International, but it will be the end of the Third International, and it was the end of the Third International, because nearly from 35, in the last seventh Congress of the Comintern is dead, a corpse, later to be dismissed by Stalin himself in 1943 for his alliance of the imperialist forces. But before that, it was already dead. It was no attempt now to revive a Third International, to improve in even an improved version, programmatically or otherwise, can do anything. The new international is an international which has to be built on the basis of the struggle of the complex to make permanent the revolution that started in 1917. Look again, the last 3 years, of, particularly of the struggle of Trotsky, when he was in Mexico until his assassination. The main actions that he did not just write articles, try to organize the few forces here and there. He tried to turn even the few forces that he had towards the developments of the class struggle, towards the revolutionary developments, towards the struggle against fascism, against the war, against class collaboration of the Popular Fronts, etc. And particularly the last 3 years, I wanted to concentrate in 3 or 4 main points, with which has a central axis, the foundation of the Fourth International, are not separated from that. The first, of course, was the preparation of the transitional program of the Fourth International, which is not just a list of demands. It is a program based on an analysis of the nature of the epoch, and how this epoch, our epoch, the imperialist epoch of wars and revolution, was expressed in this particular time. So, being in a transitional epoch, you need a program of transitional demands, which means not to ignore what are the immediate demands of the workers, if they have any vitality, these demands, but to go beyond their limits to a systematic mobilization of the masses, Trotsky said, in the road of the socialist revolution, the conquest of power, the workers' power, the dictatorship of the proletariat, sustained by the popular masses, the oppressed and impoverished popular masses. This is because many either they reject the transitional program, the sense they say, okay, it's a document of 1938, but we today, the 21st century, or the others make it a fixed dogma, a fetish, as nothing has changed from that time. No, Trotsky's method was different, and he had to grasp the method which produced the transitional program to fight for a transitional program in the 21st century today. The second, when he returned in 1937, when he arrived in Mexico, it was the year of the second frame up in Moscow, the Moscow second Moscow trial, and 1937 was the year who remained in the history of the Soviet Union and internationally as the year of the Gezovsina, for the name of Gezov, the head of the GPU at the time, the KVD GPU, who made the worst of the mass purges after the execution of the protagonists, the Bolshevik protagonists of the revolution in the first, second, and later the third Moscow trial, culminated with the assassination of Trotsky himself 80 years ago. You had the mass purges, the wars, Gezovsina. And the comrade of us in the Rakowski Center, comrade Josip Abramson, correctly said once that 1991, the collapse of the Soviet Union, it was the price that we paid for 1937 of the Gezovsina. Trotsky fought against it, against all the obstacles. He formed the Dewey Commission without any sectarianism. Many members of the Dewey Commission, named after the name of the American philosopher and pedagogist John Dewey, many of these members of this commission, International Commission of Inquiry, were hostile to Trotsky himself. Trotsky gave thousands of his documents to this commission for examination. He answered all the questions and in the counter-examination. He invited to the International Commission of Inquiry even the Soviet ambassador, the Soviet embassy in the United States, as well as the leadership of the Communist Party of the United States and of Mexico, to examine him, to put any questions they like, and to provide any document. They did not dare to come. They prepared only their murderers, their assassins. What is important, this fight in the Dewey Commission today? We have enormous, without a fight against the Stalin school of falsification, of slanders, against all of these distortions that led finally to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, we cannot understand what 1991 meant, what its consequences are even now, 2020. Without a break, without historical amnesia, you cannot build an international. For this reason, we speak about the fourth international. No, the history of the class struggle of the world revolution of the 20th century did not was in vain. That we have to forget and empirically, like empiricists, start from tabula rasa, from nothing. As nothing happened. We have to learn. And if there are some zombies of Stalin today, even in Greece and other places, who try to resurrect the old lies, the machine of the big lie of the Moscow trials, to prevent Trotsky and Trotskyists to develop, by slaughtering us. So, but it's not this the main question. Without a break with Stalinism, you cannot have any revolutionary international. First. Second lesson for the same period, which is connected to the first one. This break from Stalinism, that does not mean that we turn to liberalism or to a kind of a liberal left. The struggle of Trotsky, it was the last ideological battle he gave in 1939, 1940, after the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, against the petty bourgeois opposition inside the biggest section of the Fourth International, the American Socialist Workers' Party, who said that we have not to defend the Soviet Union. I cannot go now to the details, but the main issue it was you cannot break from Stalinism without defending all the practical, historical, and theoretical conquests of the October Socialist Revolution 1917. Only on a communist basis you can break from Stalinism, otherwise you become a tool of imperialism, of the communism in one sense or another. Burnham, who was one of the leaders of this opposition, he became a close ally of Reagan later, and before of the fascist Birch Society. Shachtman defended imperialism in the Vietnam War. So, and others today, they use the same anti-Soviet, anti-communist lies. Quite recently, the European Union, by celebrating in brackets the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, try to make communism and the fascism the same, and they use again the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, etc., etc. So why they resurrect all these things today if they had no actuality today? Again, no break, no new international or revolutionary basis without a break with Stalinism, no break with Stalinism without a revolutionary attack against imperialism and capitalism on the basis of the October Revolution. Then, in the same struggle, Trotsky spoke about, and he warned that to build the revolutionary parties, to rebuild the Fourth International, we have not just to limit ourselves to political and programmatic issues, but he said the question of philosophical method is absolutely important. That materialist dialectics is so important for a revolutionary, like he said, the finger exercises for a pianist. And this issue, the question of the relation between philosophy and the revolution, it is the issue that was much of all dismissed by the Trotskyists, and we pay a price until now, and you have to keep in mind. There is another connected with that event this last years of Trotsky that I want to mention, that it is many, they look to it as in a limited, in my view, way. I mean, the meeting with André Breton and the drafting of the manifesto for the independence of revolutionary art, and who has the signatures of Trotsky, Rivera, and Breton. Yeah, it was Breton and Trotsky who drafted. It was not just to attract artists for the new international. It was not just to attack the Nazi totalitarian onslaught against modern art or against Stalinist obscurantism. It was further. For Trotsky, in literature and revolution, he had art as the highest expression of an epoch. And then in this manifesto, the Breton Trotsky manifesto, he spoke about the crisis of civilization. This crisis of civilization, which is and then is concentrated in the crisis of the leadership of the working class, as in the first phrase of the transitional program it said. It is not just the position of the new international towards art and culture. It was to answer the main question, what kind of society revolutionary socialists and Marxists, communists, and Trotskyists fight for, based on the experience of the 20th century? What kind of society? If the October Revolution, as everybody knows, was linked with the flourishing of art, the avant-garde, that period, and without October Revolution, should be not this flourishing with the establishment of Stalin. The other way around also is true to see the things. The flourishing of the avant-garde in the revolutionary years of the October Revolution, after the revolution, under the dictatorship of the proletariat, show what kind of society we want, how the state has to be withered away, how the classes have to be to wither away, how move on international level, because you cannot do that in a single country, to a classless society where all relations of oppression, exploitation, humiliation of human being by human being can be done. All these struggles that I just mentioned very briefly cannot be disconnected from the founding of the Fourth International in 1938 and why we claim the Fourth International today and not the Fifth, or I don't know, an international without name. No. First, we are against historical amnesia and ignoring all the falsifications that were done. Secondly, we have to see that to go forward, the founding of the Fourth International, it was really a promise of the victory of the World Revolution. For us, and we said that in an article, memory is the memory of the future. It is an engagement for this communist future. This was what happened in 1938. And we have to fight for that day without ultimatums and self-proclaiming as we are the Fourth International, all others are traitors, we don't know, whatever. And no, we will destroy the fight for the Fourth International if we use ultimatistic methods, sectarianism, etc., etc. But also, we will abolish real attempt to fight for the international, for the Fourth International, if we cancel, if we liquidate all our principles, if we liquidate our prospects, if we liquidate the permanent revolution as the only way for the liberation of humanity. If we do that, we have to don't do that, to avoid that. We have to create the best conditions for dialogue with vanguard forces coming from different traditions than ours. Of course, we should do that. And we tried many times to do that in the past, and including in the 4 Euro-Mediterranean conferences organized in Athens in behalf of the CRFI from 2013, 14, 15, 17. And it was not just to create a regional bloc. We are not regionalists, we are internationalists. We have to build this international through dialogue, common action, and discussion, friendly discussions without secret diplomacy or maneuvers that we are fed up in the post-Trotsky period of all kinds of maneuvers that contaminated our movement. So we have to be honest, open, each to other like revolutionaries, and the fight for this communist future, which is included in the Foundation Act of 1938, the foundation of the Fourth International by Leon Trotsky. We cannot go forward without that. Look, and this will be my finishing comment, is the following. After the eruption of the global crisis in the post-Lehman Brothers period, nobody can speak, and nobody speak anyway, internationally about the end of history, like in 1991. Everybody said that, okay, it's not the triumphalism of capitalism after the collapse of the Soviet Union is finished. Everybody accepts it's an enormous crisis, and it's strange enough, the class-conscious ruling classes, the bourgeoisie all over the world, is much more conscious about the dead end and of the danger to its rule than the so-called international left, who is more optimistic about the future of capitalism than the capitalists themselves. So everybody can agree now that, okay, we have a crisis. It's not the end of history. And even some people some scholars, even some of them calling themselves Marxists, say, okay, capitalism is doomed. Capitalism can collapse and bury us under its ruins. For example, Wolfgang Streeck wrote a cool book on that, one of the thinking specialist thinkers of social democracy, so-called left social democracy in Germany, or somebody who was very well known for his lessons, the teaching of Marx Capital, David Harvey. He can speak about Marx. I don't go now in how he's misread Marx, but anyway, in a recent interview, he said that the concept of revolution itself, of permanent revolution as well, but of socialist revolution, it was an illusion, not only in the 20th century, but even an illusion by Marx in the 19th century. They can accept the crisis. They can accept even catastrophe. They can accept even the extinction of life on Earth. What they cannot accept, their ruling ideology, it is that revolution is possible and and it is the only future. And but if those they cannot understand that, it is not by chance that the Lebanese masses who are in the streets after this catastrophe in Beirut, the main slogan they said is Thawra. And in Sudan, the same. Thawra in Arabic means revolution. When the masses are moving in the arena where their destiny is dealt, as Trotsky said in his Russian Revolution, we have revolutionary process, even if all kind of centrists, etc., or skeptics, in one word, all that skeptics. They doubt if there is a revolution in Lebanon or a revolution in Chile. It is a revolution, by God. What is that? I heard that they deny this fact. It's a revolution. Of course, as in Lebanon, in Chile also had paused during the pandemic, but starts again and goes all over Latin America and all over the Middle East and Europe as well. The combination, the perfect storm of crisis and pandemic is disintegrating the already under disintegration European Union. It is the deepest source of this fantastic explosion of the oppressed in the center of world capitalism in the United States of America after the murder of George Floyd. It is not only the black lives that matter, or our lives, the life of humanity matter. Win against a system, a global system, capitalism, which is incompatible in every sense, from every aspect, with life. And I remember always the last time I had the opportunity to speak in Buenos Aires, I insisted on that point in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, that Marx, the central category of Marx and Marxism is not economy. Always he said that economy is an abstraction of social relations. The central category of Marx is what he said in German, Leben, Lebensprozess, Lebensweise, life, life. And the only force now in the world who can be a beacon for the fight, for the needs of the process of life, the actual life process, it is the international that Trotsky founded, the fourth international. We are proud of the international. We know that the fragmentation which followed all the failures exist. And humanity, not just Trotsky, paid an enormous price for that. But for us, always the truth is expressed by the words of Trotsky, was there's two sentences. One, a few times before his murder, when he said that the highest happiness is the preparation of the future, and, not the exploitation of the present. And also, you remember his last words before his death, when he was dying, apart his expression of love to Natalia Sadova, was, I am confident of the victory of the Fourth International. Forward. This is what I believe. We in the EEK, and not only in the EEK, I believe there are forces all over the world. We are confident for the victory not of any international, for the victory of the Fourth International. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, compañero Savas. Le mandamos un saludo revolucionario desde acá, desde la militancia de Argentina y de toda América del Sur. Y bueno, quiero aprovechar este momento también para hacer un reconocimiento y una mención de todas las compañeras y compañeros que participaron en estas jornadas, en estos diálogos sobre Trotsky y en el trabajo político, intelectual, del desarrollo de los artículos políticos y los ensayos que publicamos en estos días sobre Trotsky y su lucha política. Menciono a Eduardo Brunner, a Olga Vilieca, a Néstor Correa, a Mariano Schles, a Osvaldo Colliola y a Arlén Clemencia, a Daniel Gaido, a Emiliano Monge, a Julián Asiner, a Javier Díaz. Bueno, de todos estos compañeros, ustedes van a encontrar trabajos muy ricos, muy interesantes sobre Trotsky en www.politicaobrera.com.